6 minutes and 52 seconds left in the second quarter. Gainsbridge Fieldhouse. A loose ball, 2 players on the floor, a tangle of arms, and then a fist where a hand had no business being. Caitlin Clark hits the hardwood. Alyssa Thomas steps over her, lifts herself out of the scramble, and the game just keeps going. No whistle, no review, no flag in the air. 3 officials standing on an NBA-sized floor, and none of them saw what every single phone in the building was about to spend the next 18 hours rewinding in slow motion. By the time you woke up the next morning, the WNBA had a problem it couldn't ignore. By dinner time that day, the league office had done something it almost never does. It overruled its own referees retroactively on national television and suspended a 13-year veteran with no prior suspension on her record. 1 game, $1,000. A flagrant 2 stamped on a play the live crew didn't think was worth blowing a whistle for. That's the headline, but the headline isn't the story. The story is what that play set off. A coach who came out swinging in her press conference, a team account that posted, then quietly deleted a meme mocking the player who'd just been hit, former MVPs taking opposite sides on whether what we all saw was even intentional, a racial argument from 2 years ago getting stitched onto a foul from this week by people who weren't paying close enough attention. And underneath all of it, a league trying to figure out how to handle the most watched, most debated, most targeted rookie-turned-sophomore-turned-third-year guard it has ever produced, and discovering that it doesn't have a good answer. So let's slow this thing down. Let's actually look at what happened, what was said, what was reported, and what's just been invented online. Because this one isn't going away. And the next time these 2 teams meet, it's going to get worse before it gets better. To understand the hit, you have to understand the night. The Fever and the Mercury weren't strangers walking into Wednesday's game. 2 nights earlier, on Monday, the same 2 teams had played each other in a game that ended 86-77 Indiana, with Clark dropping 24 points, 3 rebounds, and 9 assists. That one ended with multiple technicals, including one on Clark for clapping, her 5th of the season, and an extended dust-up in the paint between Clark and Dewana Bonner that got bodies tangled up and tempers flaring. Thomas picked up a technical of her own, so did 3 other players. By the time the buzzer went off Monday, both locker rooms knew Wednesday was going to be ugly. It was uglier than anyone expected. The play in question came in the second quarter. A miss from the Fever's Aaliyah Boston on a 3-pointer, a scramble for the rebound, and Clark on the deck. Thomas, going for the ball, drove a closed fist into the throat area of a player who was already on the ground. The contact wasn't subtle. It wasn't a swipe or a graze. The slow-motion clip that started circulating online by halftime showed Thomas's fist clearly pressed into Clark's neck, then Thomas using that same arm as leverage to push herself up and stepping over Clark on the way out of the pile. No call. Play on. Aaliyah Boston's missed 3 got logged in the play-by-play as a routine event. The officials didn't huddle. They didn't review. They didn't even appear to discuss it. Clark got up, said something to a referee at the other end of the floor, and the game continued. Now, here is where you have to be careful, because 2 things happened in this game, and they are getting blended together online. The fist to the throat was one play. Clark leaving the game was a different play. She exited with 5 minutes and 15 seconds left in the third quarter, but not because of the Thomas hit. She came down awkwardly on a defender's foot after a 3-point attempt and aggravated a back issue that's been bothering her all season, the same back that took her to the locker room in the opener and forced her to miss a game against Portland on May 20th. The throat incident and the back injury are 2 separate stories, even though they happened on the same night in the same building with the same player on the floor each time. Anyone telling you the punch caused the injury is editing the timeline to make the outrage cleaner. The actual timeline is messier and arguably worse because it means Clark took the punch and then aggravated a chronic injury and somehow still walked out of that arena under her own power.
The Mercury won the game 111-109, and while the Fever locker room was processing how they just lost their 4th game of the season scoring over 100 points, Somewhere on a corporate phone, a Phoenix social media manager was making a decision they would regret in about 45 minutes. But we'll get to that. Stephanie White did not come to her post-game press conference in a forgiving mood. The Fever head coach had spent the entire second half watching her star get worked over, watching her bench rack up fouls at a rate her opponent wasn't, and watching the officiating crew apparently not see any of it. By the time she sat down in front of the microphones, she'd already brought the Thomas play to the attention of the officials at halftime. They didn't do anything with it, so she did. "I just saw it," she said. "I'm not sure if it had any impact on her health or not, but it was egregious. The fact that it was a no call. I heard about it at halftime. I brought it to the attention of the officials at halftime, yet we still had 11 fouls in the fourth quarter to their 2. They still shot 24 free throws in the second half. Number one, you gotta call it. It's absolutely egregious and utterly disrespectful." She wasn't done. "And then number two, you're aware of what happened 2 nights ago, and that stuff still happens? Absolutely unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. We have a generational talent and a WNBA superstar who had 2 cheap shots right there that weren't called." 2 cheap shots. That was the phrase that left the building first. Not a hard foul, not a physical play. Cheap shots, plural, with the implication that one of the best players the women's game has ever produced was being treated on national television like a tackling dummy. White went on to question how the league could review a reckless closeout where a defender came down on top of an opponent's foot and not upgrade it, while leaving an obvious throat contact off the report entirely. Within an hour, the clip had a life of its own. Blue Sky, Twitter, Threads, Instagram, every platform with a video player on it had the slow-motion version on repeat. Robert Griffin III posted it from his account, calling for the WNBA to protect Clark and every player from what he framed as targeted behavior. Sports talk hosts who hadn't paid attention to the WNBA all season suddenly had a take. By the time the 11 o'clock highlights were airing, the conversation had already eaten the actual game result whole. And then Phoenix made it worse. The Mercury social media accounts, multiple outlets confirmed this, posted a meme mocking Clark after the win. The post went up, the post came down, but the screenshot stayed up forever because that's how the internet works now. A team whose forward had just driven a fist into a rival star's throat had, in the immediate aftermath of the victory, decided to taunt that same star on social media. Whoever made that call inside the Mercury front office woke up on Thursday to a different problem than they thought they were going to have. By morning, the league office had something nobody at WNBA headquarters wanted to be holding: a viral clip, a coach's quote about a generational talent being disrespected, a deleted team post, and the inescapable fact that the officials on the floor had missed something the entire country had now watched 100 times. They had a decision to make, and the longer they took to make it, the worse the optics got. The WNBA does not retroactively suspend players often. The rule exists. The league office has the authority, after reviewing any game, to reclassify a flagrant foul, or to classify as flagrant any foul not called during a game, and to impose a fine or suspension on top of it. But the rule getting used is a different story. When a league office overrides its own referees the day after a game, on a play those referees didn't even bother to review live, it's saying something loud. It's saying the people whose job it is to officiate got it wrong, badly enough that the front office had to clean up after them in public. That's what happened on Thursday afternoon. The statement was tight, almost clinical. The WNBA announced that upon post-game review, the Phoenix Mercury's Alyssa Thomas has received a flagrant 2 penalty and a 1-game suspension for recklessly making contact with her fist to the throat area of Indiana Fever guard Caitlin Clark. The league described the contact as a non-basketball act. The suspension would be served on Saturday, June 27th, when the Mercury visited the Toronto Tempo. The flagrant 2 carried a $1,000 fine on top of the lost game. Fever president Kelly Krausperp put out a measured statement of her own. Player safety should be paramount in our league. We appreciate the WNBA's review of last night's incident and the action taken. Right now, our focus is on Caitlin and our entire team as we prepare for Saturday. No spike the football energy, no piling on Thomas, just an acknowledgement that the league had done what the league had to do. But the league doing what the league had to do raised a much bigger question, and it's one that didn't disappear when Thomas's suspension was announced. If the play was so clearly a flagrant 2 that the front office had to upgrade it from a no call to the most severe foul classification in the rulebook in less than 24 hours, what does that say about every other Clark play this season that didn't get reviewed? What does it say about the live officiating crew, 3 professionals who watched a fist go into a player's neck and saw nothing worth a whistle? The league has been quietly trying to walk this line for 2 years now. Officials are human, the argument goes. The game is fast. Calls get missed. That defense holds up exactly until the play is bad enough that the league has to override its own crew on national television, and then it stops holding up entirely. Because what the suspension said, without the WNBA ever using the words, is that the officials missed something they shouldn't have. And once you've admitted that on one play, you can't really pretend it isn't possible on the others. Whether one game was enough, whether it should have been 3 or 5 or the rest of the season, became the next argument. But the league had made its statement. The next argument was about what kind of play this actually was. This is the part of the story that the loudest voices online refuse to slow down for, so let's slow down for it. Because the most interesting thing about the Thomas suspension isn't that it happened, it's that people who actually played in this league, who actually know Thomas, who actually understand how she plays defense, can watch the same clip and come to different conclusions about what they're looking at. On one side, you have Stephanie White, the Fever coach who lived it. You have Robert Griffin III, whose viral post framed the play as targeted behavior the league needed to stamp out. You have a fan base that has spent 2 seasons watching their star get knocked around and reach the limit of its patience. You have analysts looking at the slow-motion clip and seeing a closed fist drive into a throat, period, end of discussion. To this camp, intent isn't even worth debating. The hand was closed, the contact was to the neck. The follow-through included stepping over Clark on the way up. Pattern of behavior, dirty play, suspend her, move on. On the other side, you have voices that should make anyone slow down before they assume the worst. Former WNBA player Ty Young, speaking on Prime's WNBA postgame show on Thursday, said this: "From what I saw, I don't feel like it was intentional. Playing against AT, guarding AT, and knowing AT as a player, she's a physical player. And if she wants to do something, it's intentional. That wasn't intentional." That's not a fan opinion. That's a former pro who has guarded Thomas in actual games, saying she knows what Thomas looks like when Thomas means it, and this wasn't that. Hall of Famer Cynthia Cooper on the same broadcast made a related point. If the foul had been called in real time, reviewed in the moment, and the decision had been made there that it was a flagrant 2, all of this, the firestorm, the backlash, the retroactive process, would have looked completely different. The problem, in Cooper's framing, isn't only what Thomas did. The problem is that the officials punted on the call. The play festered on social media overnight, and by the time the league got around to addressing it, the discourse had already eaten the play. Defector ran a piece titled, "Don't Let Bored Football Fans Tell the Story of Caitlin Clark's Season," arguing that the original sequence didn't look like much in real time, that the bench reaction was minimal, and that the play had taken on its much richer life in slow motion online, not in the building. The Ringer ran a piece arguing the suspension didn't solve the WNBA's problem, it exposed it. Their writer's framing was that you can hold 2 things at once, that Thomas made a mistake that needed to be punished, and that the discourse around the punishment is doing more damage to the league than the foul ever did. This is the version of the argument that doesn't make it onto RageBait YouTube, but it's the version reasonable people are actually having. Was it deliberate? People who know Thomas's tells say no. Was it reckless? The league said yes in writing, with a Flagrant 2 attached. Can both of those things be true at the same time? Of course they can. A play can be punishable without being premeditated. A player can deserve a suspension without being branded a villain. The reason Thomas isn't getting the benefit of the doubt from the most of the audience, though, isn't really about this one play. It's about everything that came before it.
Alyssa Thomas has been in this league for 13 years. That's longer than some of the rookies on the current rosters have been driving. She's a 6-time All-Star, a perennial MVP candidate, and one of the most respected veterans in the women's game. She also has permanent ligament tears in both shoulders, injuries that affect her shooting form to this day, the kind of damage that came from an era when WNBA players finished a domestic season and immediately flew overseas to play another one, leaving no window for surgery or recovery. Her shoulders, in a real sense, paid for the league we have now. The Ringer's piece described it bluntly. Her broad, tattered shoulders carried the WNBA through its darker days. That's the sympathetic side of the ledger. The other side is the one fans keep bringing up. According to reporting from Hawkeye's Wire, Thomas threw then Chicago Sky forward Angel Reese to the floor in 2024. No suspension. In 2025, she elbowed Washington Mystics forward Kiki Ariafin in the throat. Different player, similar contact point, same lack of league action. Reporting also points to the 2025 WNBA playoffs semifinals against the Minnesota Lynx, where Thomas was the defender on the play that ended Nafisa Collier's postseason, the same play that fueled Collier's now famous public criticism of Commissioner Kathy Engelbert. None of those incidents drew a suspension. This one finally did. That history is the iceberg under this week's headline. It's also why the "she didn't mean it" argument lands differently for different audiences. If you've watched Thomas closely for a decade, you've probably absorbed Ty Young's read. She's physical, she plays on the edge, but when she actually wants to send a message, you can tell. If you've only really started watching the WNBA since Clark arrived, what you see is a pattern of an aggressive veteran ending up in the middle of incidents that hurt people, and a league that mostly hasn't done much about it. Both of those views are looking at real evidence, they're just looking at different parts of it. The Ringer described Thomas as a bona fide trash talker who toes the line between physical and dirty. That's probably the most honest single sentence anyone has written about her this week. She is not a villain. She is also not blameless. The line between physical and dirty is a real line, and reasonable people can disagree about which side of it she landed on Wednesday night. What's not in dispute is that this is the first time in her career the league office has decided she crossed that line badly enough to lose a game over it. So why this hit? Why now? Why does this specific play by this specific player against this specific opponent end the streak? That's the question that takes us into the part of the story everyone wants to argue about and almost nobody is arguing about honestly. Caitlin Clark is the reason the WNBA's average broadcast audience looks the way it does in 2026. She is the reason national networks are bidding for game packages. She is the reason a rookie's college games drew bigger audiences than NBA Finals games, and her professional debut became a cultural event. Clark is not the only good young player in this league. She is the player whose presence rewrote the league's business model. That fact is not in dispute on either side of this argument. What is in dispute, and what gets weaponized by every loud voice on every platform, is what that popularity has done to the room. Here's where I want to be careful, because there's a version of this story that's been going around all week that splices two different events together to manufacture a controversy that didn't actually happen the way it's being told. Let me lay it out cleanly. You may have seen a quote attributed to Alyssa Thomas about racism from the Indiana Fever fanbase. The quote is real. It reads, "In my 11-year career, I've never experienced the racial comments from the Indiana Fever fanbase." But here's the part that most of the videos circulating this week leave out. That quote, according to Outkick's own reporting, was from a post-game press conference during a 2024 playoff series, not from anything Thomas said about this week's incident. She was sitting next to her then-teammate Dejanay Carrington, who had her own well-documented history with Clark, including the eye poke incident from the 2024 playoffs. If you watch a video this week that tries to tell you Thomas deflected from the throat play by playing the race card in her post-game interview Wednesday night, that video is splicing a 2024 quote onto a 2026 event. That doesn't mean the race conversation in the WNBA isn't real. It doesn't mean Thomas's prior comments weren't controversial. It means the specific accusation that she dodged accountability for Wednesday's foul by leaning on racism allegations isn't supported by the actual post-game audio from this week. Reports indicate Thomas hasn't, since the foul, given an extensive press availability addressing it directly, and her teammates and assistant coach Kristi Tolliver have done much of the public defending on her behalf.
What is true about the broader environment is harder to handle in a two-sentence quote, but it matters. The WNBA's racial composition is what it is. Clark's primarily but not exclusively white fan base is what it is. There is a real and reported pattern of hateful messages, racist, homophobic, misogynistic, being sent to black and queer players in the league, particularly after games against the Fever. The league issued a statement last year acknowledging it was looking into allegations of racism from Fever fans after a 2025 game. That part isn't manufactured. The Ringer's framing of the discourse as a cultural Rorschach test, where every Clark argument becomes a stand-in for whatever cultural argument the commentator already wanted to have, is uncomfortably accurate. Where reasonable observers seem to be landing is somewhere most loud voices won't go. A dirty play can be a dirty play. A coach can be right to be furious. A suspension can be deserved. And the discourse around Clark can be poisoned on both sides by bad faith actors using a single basketball play to launder whatever argument they were already trying to make. All of those things can be true at once. The Rinner piece this week made that point directly. There isn't a good versus evil clean answer in any of this, even though our culture makes it almost impossible not to reach for one. Which brings us finally to what the WNBA itself is actually facing, and it's a bigger problem than Alyssa Thomas. Strip the personalities out of this story for a second. Forget Clark and Thomas. Forget the deleted Mercury post and the viral clip. Forget the race argument and the Rookie of the Year discourse. What you have left is a league that just admitted in writing that its officials missed a flagrant 2 on a star player in a nationally watched game and had to fix it the next afternoon from the front office. That's not a Caitlin Clark problem. That's a referee problem. And it's the actual story the WNBA can't afford to keep ignoring. The Ringer summed it up cleanly. The Thomas suspension didn't solve the WNBA's problem, it exposed it. The league has been struggling all season with officiating that has frustrated fans, coaches, and players on every roster. Clark herself drew her 5th technical of the season earlier this month for clapping at officials, a foul she publicly disputed in her own post-game remarks, telling reporters words to the effect that the officiating just didn't like competitive basketball anymore. The Fever-Mercury game had 11 fourth-quarter fouls called on Indiana and 2 on Phoenix, with 24 second-half free throws for the visiting team, according to White's count from the podium. Those are the kinds of numbers that make coaches lose their professional composure, and White lost hers in a hurry. Then there's the structural picture. The WNBA is expanding to a 50-game regular season next year. Injuries are already up across the league this year. Lucas Seehafer, who tracks WNBA injuries for the IX Sports, told their podcast that more games mathematically means more opportunities for injuries to happen, and trend lines suggest 2027 will see another increase. The most watched, most marketed, most targeted player in the league has missed time with a back issue. The officials are getting publicly second-guessed by the very office that employs them. The commissioner is still working under the long shadow of Nafisa Collier's broadside from last fall, and the players themselves can't seem to agree on what kind of physicality is acceptable in their own sport anymore.
Nobody at WNBA headquarters wants to say it out loud, but the league is dealing with the consequences of its own success faster than it can build the infrastructure to absorb them. More viewers means more scrutiny. More scrutiny means every call gets analyzed, every quote gets clipped, every dirty play becomes a national referendum. The WNBA wasn't built, structurally or organizationally, to handle this kind of attention. It's getting it anyway. And every flashpoint, every Thomas hit, every Clark technical, every Mercury social media slip exposes another seam. That's the real story. That's the one that won't be fixed by suspending one player for one game.
Here's what's on the schedule. Alyssa Thomas serves her suspension on Saturday, June 27th against the Toronto Tempo. The Mercury and the Fever play each other again on July 9th in Phoenix in their final regular season meeting. And it's worth circling that date now because the buildup is going to be enormous. Caitlin Clark, as of the most recent reporting, is expected to miss at least Saturday's game against the Los Angeles Sparks with the back injury that has flared up repeatedly this season. The Fever, the Mercury, and the league office all have a few weeks to figure out how they want to handle the rematch, because the rematch is coming whether anyone is ready for it or not. The WNBA has spent the better part of 3 years selling itself as tougher, more physical, more authentic, more competitive than the casual audience ever gave it credit for. The marketing campaigns lean into it. The veterans talk about it. The new fans tuning in for Clark are getting a faster, harder, more confrontational sport than the highlight packages of the 1990s would have led them to expect. That has been, in many ways, a good thing for the league. But there's a version of tough and physical that's basketball, and there's a version of it that costs the league the player who finally got the rest of the country to watch. The line between those two versions is the line the WNBA is being asked to draw in real time, in front of cameras, with millions of new viewers watching how it handles itself. Wednesday's hit and Thursday's suspension were the league's first real public attempt at drawing that line this season. Whether it drew the line in the right place, too soft, too harsh, or just about right, depends on which corner of the internet you're standing in. So here's the question worth leaving you with, and I mean it as a real question, not a manufactured outrage one. Was the suspension enough? Was it too much? Or was it beside the point entirely? A single game's penalty applied to a much larger problem the league hasn't figured out how to solve yet. Drop your take in the comments. Be honest about what you actually saw, not what you've been told to see. And if you've watched this far, hit the subscribe button so the next time one of these flashpoints goes off, you hear the version of the story that actually checks what happened before it tells you how to feel about it. We'll see you in the next one.